What's up, everybody? Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., and Claudia Bellafato holding it down in the DraftKings studio in Boston. We got a great show for you guys. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, and review us. Leave us a 5-star rating. Try and watch us here live Monday through Friday, 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKings Network. Catch the best of GoJo and Golic from noon to 1 p.m. Eastern as well, wherever you hear VSiN on the radio. Good one today. A lot of basketball we got coming up, Claudia, right?
Lots of hoops, and whatever you thought the numbers were for the Iowa-LSU game, you're wrong, because they were even better. So we're going to talk about the record ratings for Iowa-LSU, the center of the sports world in women's hoops, and really all of basketball. Coaching the Mikes, coaches that impacted the Golics. Grade A conspiracy. Get the tinfoil hats ready. What's going on in Oakland? But first, guys, we have to talk about Joel Embiid, because he wasn't, then he was, then he wasn't, then he was, then maybe? Keith Pompey of the Philadelphia Inquirer came on the show yesterday, told you guys he's not playing. He wasn't supposed to play. 2 hours before tip-off, he was not. And then he played, and then I should say he practiced in warm-ups. Apparently the left knee felt good enough for him to go because he did. 24 points, 6 rebounds, 7 assists, 3 steals, 6 turnovers in the win over the Thunder. Pretty good stat line. But then after the game, guys, he said, I wish I played better. It's like, Joel, you've been out for months, dude. What do you expect to happen?
Boy, is that not the ultimate, alpha great player mentality where everything is never going to be good enough no matter the circumstances there. And the circumstances are, just as Claudia said, incredible. I'd imagine, and it's been insinuated by some, the 76ers are probably going to hear from the league office on this one, because if I'm the Oklahoma City Thunder and 2 hours before the game, I am preparing for a world where we're not going to have one of our star players in Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and they're not going to have one of their star players in Joel Embiid, who might be returning. I might have approached things a little bit differently in my lead up to the game there, so it won't be the biggest thing in the world. But, Dad, a return shrouded in mystery right up until the end does net the 76ers their ultimate goal, which is a look at their star big man, healthy for an entire game, contributing to a winning effort. Did it change any of how you felt about the 76ers based on everything we've talked about?
Well, I mean, that's why I brought up the other day. I don't think they're going to make a run for the title, but my thought was who is going to be the biggest for one of the higher seeds if Philadelphia is in the play-in like they're probably going to be. We'll see where they end up. They're making a move. We'll talk about that. Or the Lakers and Golden State Warriors, right? We don't think any of those teams has enough to win the title, but they're going to be that tough out for that higher seed. So that's what I'm wondering. And a lot of it depends on, because we'll get into the injury cycle and you're out for a while, how that affects you. One of the ways is certainly, your wind.
Yeah.
You got to. Now, it is a sport where you can really mimic it and practice and really run hard and play hard, unlike football.
And he had played his first live 5-on-5 this weekend with that team to that end.
But you could still see, I mean, he was winded. He felt it. And he got the big bulky brace on his knee. He felt the wind. He played 29 minutes. His minutes were short, or his stints on the court were shorter than they normally would. But that's all expected. that's expected to work your way back into the lineup. It's a big win for them against a team that's fighting for the number one spot in the West, again, without SGA. But still, it's a nice win for them moving forward. And, and Tyrese Maxey didn't play last night for Philadelphia. He was out as well. So this is a good win, and going forward, we'll see. We'll see what kind of shape he can get in. As I said, I think, Claudio, there'll be a tough out for sure in the playoffs, but I don't see any kind of title run. No.
Well, you talked about the health. That's obviously key for the postseason, but also if you look at the regular season, what's remaining, they have the easiest remaining schedule. They have Miami and one other squad, the only two teams with a winning percentage right now. The team without Embiid, 14-27, 27-8 with him. So I have to agree with you, Senior. I don't know about a deep playoff run, but who knows? If they can stay healthy, GoJo, I don't know. Which side of this are you on?
So I think if they can stay healthy, they're what we've always talked about. They're a froggy out. And it's a reason why I thought this was really interesting. Tom Ziller, who does a great newsletter, Good Morning Let's Basketball, talked about an idea that I've heard other people banter about that he brought up here is letting teams that are the top seeds in each conference pick which of the lower seeds they want to face in the first round for reasons like this.
Yeah.
The fact that you're going to have a 76ers team that has changed drastically in the last day just by this, what Claudia mentioned there, those splits, what Joel Embiid offers, the fact that before his injury, he was doing something that only Wilt Chamberlain had done in averaging 35 points a game coming off an MVP season. That's a daunting task for whoever's going to face them. Even if hey, they probably don't have the gas to make this happen. You mentioned no Tyrese Maxey last night, but even since Joel Embiid was out, you've got Buddy Hield in there now. You've got Campaign in there now. You've got new guys that in 7 games before the postseason, he's going to have to learn as best he can. And you saw it didn't all look like it was great last night. It didn't all look clean as you would expect. But that's going to be something they've got to kind of fast track if they're going to make any sort of run. So I would put them as, hey, potential landmine for you, but probably not the big bad that they were supposed to be in the Eastern Conference.
So 6 is the number. There's in the area of 6 games left in the regular season, and you want to be 6th or better in the conference for that automatic playoff. You're not in the play-in. And right now, that's held by the Pacers. And 7 is Miami and 8 is Philadelphia, but there's only 2 games separating those 3 teams. And you look at it, the Pacers have won 2 in a row, the Heat have won 3 in a row, the Philadelphia has won 2 in a row. So they're all on a very small winning streak, but winning. So as I said, 5, 6, 7 games left. 6 is the magic number to be in that 6th slot, and those 3 teams are fighting for it. And it just got a little more interesting because you didn't really think Philly was going to be there because we weren't sure about Joel Embiid. Still amazed at normally what happens, I don't care what sport it is, when you're thinking about playing coming back from an injury or had a long injury, an injury that week, it's game time decision is usually what it is. They go out, you go out on the field, on the court, on the ice, whatever. You do pregame, you see how you feel, and you decide if you're going to play or not. And, so that's what you think here. But to be considered out and then go to questionable, that's a big jump. You're jumping over doubtful, and you're making everybody kind of scratch their head and say, what the hell's going on here? And now, it's not like, nobody feels bad for billionaire owners when they get fined or anything like that, but they're probably, unless they have some kind of good explanation for this, which I don't know what is, they'll probably be fine, which I don't think is a big concern for them.
Jumping over doubtful sounds like the great name for a romance novel. So someone go and make that happen here. You could say part of the reason he did so well got to be the shoes. Joel Embiid, new Skechers athlete,
that had to be a nice deal,
as opposed to the other day. I'm sure that was nice. I don't know how our friend Howie Long feels about that, the longtime face of Skechers. I don't know if Joel's wearing shape-ups out on the court, maybe help with the knee issues there.
What size? I wonder what size, because Howie's, normal. What's normal for a big man, what the normal kind of shoe is.
Well, what's a goon to a guy?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But now Joel, I don't know
17.
What size shoe he's 17. Wearing. 17. Wow. It's a lot of Sketcher material.
I was going to say, as someone like we've been, me, you, and my brother have been 14, been able to share shoes most of our life. That's just uncomfortable enough of a size to not be able to get it in stores a lot of times, where you got to go and do the awkward thing where you look at this person working there and they don't have it, but they're like, I'll go look in the back just to make you feel good. And then they ask if you want to order it. I never want to order it. I can order it on my app online now. But 17, that's the big one. Like, I remember Max Starks, who was with the Pittsburgh Steelers for a long time, when I got there for training camp as a rookie, his shoes were like 17 or 18, and they were so big that after he had left, because I'm assuming he had gotten along so well with the training staff, they had nailed a pair of his size 17 or 18 cleats above the door going in there. And that was another one of those things that I looked up, I saw that, I go, oh, those are the type of people that play football here. I am probably going pro in something other than sports.
Those are monstars for sure. And then, of course, if
Matt's
you're
a lovely man,
if you're at 17 or higher in shoe size, I hope they can afford those shoes. You're probably paying a lot of money for them.
That's one of the
Joel Embiid, throw out the credit card.
He probably can.
He's probably. That's what I always say about 7-footers is unless you are a professional basketball player, you just have a lifetime of getting upcharged on custom clothing.
Exactly.
Because you can't buy off the rack as a 7-footer.
Yeah.
You can shop at DXL with me and the thick boys, but that's going to look pretty boxy on you as a lanky 7-footer.
You look like a square.
It's why I think the vast majority, there was that stat a while back about the percentage of 7-footers that end up playing professional basketball worldwide, and it's a pretty high percentage. And I think part of that is just survival. It's like, if I don't do this and make the kind of money that comes with being tall professionally, I am going to be pretty doomed, Claudia.
Can you guys guess, and maybe you already know Wemby's size?
Oh, he's going to be like, what, like a 19?
20 and a half.
20 and a half.
I mean, he had no choice. He had no choice but to ball. That was all he had, man. A dude that size and that build, what's he going to do?
Yeah.
What's he going to do?
What else are you going to do? Your path is kind of set, and you kind of hope they're good. And it turns out, he's really good.
You know what I'd love to see? 7-foot swimmer. We always talk about flippers,
a lot
levers.
of them are tall, though. I mean, you see these guys, they're 6'7", 6'8". I mean, and man, are they moving through the water. But
athletic,
a lot of, I think Michael Phelps is 6'5", 6'6".
Big flippers.
Yeah, it's just incredible.
Big flippers.
Yeah.
So all of this aside, in terms of Joel Embiid's return to the court, I did think this was interesting from Joel Embiid, because we talked about the other day what he means to this city. Joel Embiid's persona as an athlete has always bordered on pro wrestler. It's overwhelming confidence.
Right.
It's a guy who knows how to play to the crowd, and especially play to his crowd. He has been, really since the early portion of his career, one of the quintessential Philadelphia athletes, where he shows, hey, if I go out there and work hard, if I sacrifice for this team and I play tough, this crowd is going to love me. And oh, by the way, he's one of the most skilled players in the NBA and a reigning MVP. But last night, Joel Embiid, after the game, mentioned in a couple of instances that mentally this injury had affected him more than most. Listen to this.
When I get hurt, I just, move on to the next one. I'm like, to the next one. This one was it took a toll mentally. I just want to come back. I think we got a chance, even, at the level that I'm at, and I'm only going to get better. But, this one was probably the hardest by far, especially mentally.
He said after the game even more. He mentioned this twice. He said it was depressing going through it this time around. And Dad, you think about the number of times now that he's been injured as a big, the fact that he's 30 years old now, and I'm sure thinking more and more about his basketball mortality as he goes forward, and the fact that he said, I know how good this team can be when he's on the court. All of this adds up to what's always the most difficult final leg for any player coming back from injury, which is the mental portion.
Listen, this team was third when he was playing. Above them, it was Milwaukee, which we'll talk about the struggles they're having. Above them is Boston, which is, the best team in basketball, but people are questioning, or best maybe they in Denver, but questioning, what the playoffs are going to be like. So I could see that. But man, I've always said this, and it doesn't matter if you're an average player like I was or a star like Joel Embiid. Throw Aaron Rodgers even in there. I know Aaron Rodgers was, talking nationally every week on a Pat McAfee show, but I'm talking about the sport. It doesn't matter star or not. When you're out, you're invisible. You're there training. Everybody sees you, daps you up, saying, hey, good to see you. And then they go on about what they do for a living without you. And you don't go out there and you can't help them. No matter what, you're going to be out. It can be a mental draw on you. You always talk, athletes are so used to just physically recovering. I got hurt, my elbow's hurt. Okay, I know what that is. 6 weeks, boom, I'm back. I know my knee got hurt, my wrist got hurt, whatever. And you recover physically. But then it is, while you're going through it, the mental side of, I can't help my team. We were third, now we're fourth, now we're fifth, now we're sixth, now we're seventh. We keep dropping down. further and further. Now we're 8th. You see that going, and you can't help. And then it's for you physically and personally when you go out on the field. You're told your knee is fine. You're told your shoulder is fine. You're told your elbow is fine. And then it's going out there and letting it go and trusting that and saying, okay, I haven't done this in 8 weeks to the full extent of a game. Now I have to go ball it out really hard. There is the mental side of getting over that for a running back with a knee making that first cut in a real game, of getting over that. And then you throw in, oh, by the way, you're a 7-footer running up and down the court for the first time in a while in a real game, and how that affects you cardiovascularly.
Well, and I think a 7-footer who also knows the unfortunate and dubious history of 7-footers at his size, especially weight-wise, that have multiple lower body injuries over time. The fact that it's that here we go again, where it seems to always be something where finally last year he was healthy enough, long enough, playing at the level we're accustomed to him playing to get the MVP that had eluded him. And now this year it's right back to, oh, my body's betraying me again. If it wasn't something before, now it's this keeping me out. Because usually, Dad, the other part of this is when we talk about players being out, there is always that secret. While Joel Embiid, I know, wanted his team to do well because he wanted to be in a position coming back to make the postseason, there's always part of you that kind of selfishly, I think human nature wants to know the team misses you. Wants to know, oh, this is much better with me there. And we've seen plenty of examples. I always think of the Peyton Manning Colts example of the MVP by withdrawal, where you take someone out and you see their value to the program. Joel certainly qualifies for that, as we've watched with the Sixers this season. But I think on the other side, we talked about, to me, it's more, oh, wow, someone with the persona of Joel Embiid, who has seemed so unbreakable for so long despite all this and has maintained this overwhelming confidence, just looked at all of us and said, this has affected me in a way that is not had before. And I do think that's something to keep in mind down the stretch here. And also, I think something that's generally helpful. I know we don't need to make everything the overarching mental health conversation. We've had a lot of those. But I do think someone of Joel Embiid's physical and also game stature saying something like this is good for a lot. I'm sure for some of his peers who go through this and don't feel like they have an outlet to voice this stuff, because most of them are afraid of losing their jobs when this stuff happens. That's always the big difference too. Depending on your station in the game, you're someone who's worried about, okay, is this injury going to cost me my meal ticket? Versus Joel Embiid, who's just worried about, is it going to cost my team the postseason that they want and that I want for them? Or is it going to cost me my place in the annals of NBA history? They're different problems, but they're problems nonetheless.
No, completely agree. As I talked about earlier, my generation about pushing it down. Well, it's the same thing if you're not one of the top players, where you can't afford to be seen in that light, as they say, and thought, but Joel Embiid or other stars who mention it can kind of lead the way there, where you can then feel like you can say something as well. So it was an interesting admission from, and I've talked about this forever, when you always think you are bulletproof, man, it ain't going to happen to me, I'm going to be fine. The person next to you in the locker room could have just had a horrific injury on the court, on the field, whatever play, and going to be out, and you say, man, boy, that stinks, but not going to happen to me. And you just think it's just not going to happen, and then it does, and you rehab. And you mentioned, look how much the Jets missed Aaron Rodgers. Look how much Philadelphia missed, Joel Embiid. But also, on the other side, look at, Cats out for Minnesota. They stayed right up near the top. So you wonder from a mental side if he's looking at it going, oh, wow, they really haven't missed a whole lot since I've been out.
Cat's one of those guys, I don't worry about him telling us how he feels. Cat, who has famously gone on those podcasts with Pat Bevan, told us that he believes he has changed the game and people will remember his name long after he's gone. I don't think he has any trouble with sharing. Cats, and I'd say, I'm not making fun of him for that.
Right.
We appreciate all that. We like athletes that are giving them themselves right there. And Karl Anthony Towns has certainly always been of that ilk.
So this is what you love, is races at the end, right? You're actually getting a good one at the top of the Western Conference.
Yeah.
And here in the East, you're getting one for a play-in, to be in the play-in or not. And Philadelphia, I mentioned they're trailing the Heat by a game and a half. That's who they play next. They play them tomorrow. And then they get a Grizzlies team, which is under 500, a Spurs team under 500, but has Wemby, a Magic team, which is over 500, and then the Nets team under 500. So the schedule favors them, as we have talked about. So we'll see. But a big game tomorrow night against the Miami Heat, who both Miami and Philly trying to catch the Pacers at that number 6 spot.
A Miami Heat team who's been decimated by injury during the second half of the season themselves. And you look at the Eastern Conference in general. I know injury, I think at this time of year, it ends up being a dominant part of the conversation, right? We have Kawhi Leonard, who got sent back to LA for knee soreness the other night, which maybe for another player wouldn't sound the alarms as much. But because it's Kawhi Leonard, all of a sudden we're looking and wondering, is this the thing? As we've constantly been waiting for the other shoe to drop for the Clippers. You listen to the New York Knicks talk. Josh Hart the other day coming out and talking about all of his teammates that he doesn't think are going to be back for this postseason stretch for a team that's been so great for so long. I do wonder if that's going to prompt a conversation about the Tom Thibodeau way, where it's, hey, even in games we're blowing folks out, we've got key players of ours playing 40-plus minutes a night in a way that once you get to this time of year was always the fear with Tibbs. He can raise your floor back to where you go, but all of a sudden, can he be the guy to get you over the hump, knowing how hard he's going to grind these guys into dust? And so all of the injury news, I think, is going to take center stage during this final stretch as we try and organize the pieces and start looking ahead to some of the potential first-round matchups that we've got coming up in the NBA playoffs, because we are getting close and finally there, and nothing encapsulates that more than Joel Embiid finally getting back on the court last night.
And for everybody who's looking forward to it, I think we're getting closer and closer to that Lakers Golden State 9-10 playoff game right now.
Adam Silver's dreams continue to come to reality to make the best television product possible by putting a generation's 2 best stars in the play-in. But coming up next, let's talk about real TV dreams becoming reality. The LSU Iowa number, if you thought it was big, think bigger, friends. Dear God.
If you had to put a number on the LSU-Iowa rematch, what would you have guessed for viewership? 9 million, 10 million, 11? Well, you would have been wrong, because it was actually 12.3 million viewers on ESPN, which was the largest TV audience ever for a women's basketball game in the U.S. But not only that, it was more than the World Series, the NBA Finals, pretty much any other major event that you could think of from last year. The previous record was set more than 40 years ago when CBS broadcasted the 1983 title game. 1983, guys, we're talking about with Cheryl Miller. So, yeah. Record-breaking, I think, is probably the least of words that you could think about for this game. Exceeded expectations. We talked about it. But an impact like this, think about the tickets for the men's Final Four. It's cheaper than the women's tickets, GoJo. Senior, guys, this is beautiful. It's beautiful.
It is beautiful. First off, easy on making it sound how far 83 was ago, okay? So
I was a little stunned by that. That was like when
Easy.
people say that MASH is still the all-time high, like single most watched TV program of all time. I'm like, wow, that long ago.
Yeah, okay,
Impressive
easy.
there.
Both easy.
I mean, you only had
Okay?
like 3 channels back then, though, so it was either
Okay.
like CBS or what did you watch? Like cable, like public access?
You done?
Was that what else you guys
both
had
of you
back then?
done? You done age shaming me? And that was the Cheryl Miller game, by the way. She had the big time there. But yeah, okay, I
Sure,
digress.
you remember that.
And I'm okay. I'm sorry.
I wasn't even
sorry
a
I brought it
thought
up now,
in the
but
world, so.
Okay, all right. I don't need any of that.
Years
Don't
down the
need
road.
any of that, okay? Back to the story. I guess I took us off the story.
Shot
Yeah.
by Cheryl.
It's one thing when the hype of a game is there, and then you kind of cross your fingers and hope it hits. Yeah, this one surpassed both on the court and obviously with the eyes that saw it. This number beat every college football game, regular season college football game this year, except for Ohio State, Michigan.
Yeah.
That's how big this number was. So, man, it was great.
I was going to say selfishly, like I went back and looked and started checking when I started seeing some of that because I was like, is this possibly true? And you look at like the Notre Dame Ohio State game that meant a lot to us. That was one of the big early season tilts in college football, and it did like a 10-5. So, and this is a good time to remind everyone, this is an Elite 8 game. This is not a Final Four game. This is not the national championship game. This game wasn't on network television. This was on cable. This was on ESPN. That's not supposed to do this kind of number. When you look at what last year's title game did, the game this was a rematch of and did a 9-9 on ABC, which was a big number for them. Hell, the UConn-USC game after did a big number that was approaching that too. And so for this to jump up over, it was exactly what we talked about yesterday, Dad. It was when you put all your chips into the middle of the table and you hit going away. You hit everything possible that you could have bet on this one. And we know the fallout for this is going to be people talking about, well, how much of this is tied to Caitlin Clark? What part of that goes away when you remove her from the equation? And what happens going forward? Now, LSU was a massive draw. The fact that we had stakes that were holdover from last year, does a matchup with Paige Beckers and UConn hit the same? Which is a wild thing to even suppose about, given the recent history of the sport involving UConn, involving Paige, and involving this potential matchup. But all of that, I think, falls away and does not really matter, Dad. What you've seen again and what all of this is about is proof of concept being reaffirmed over and over for the women's game.
Yeah, listen, Caitlin Clark has helped numbers get blown out of the water, but you know what you can do after that game was over? You could turn the channel if you want, but UConn and USC drew 6.7 million. That number alone would have beaten every women's final game except last year's.
Yeah.
Every women's final game since 96, since last year. Other than last year, I should say. So it drew a big number of its own. Obviously not as much as the matchup we were all looking at with Iowa and LSU, but still a big number like that. Now you wonder what this next one's going to draw. And then the next, because Caitlin brings the big number, if they're to win and go on to the finals, and it's them versus South Carolina, which we all think what that number is going to bring. She just keeps bringing bigger and bigger numbers.
Yeah, and so I think overall what becomes interesting with a lot of this is what is the effect that you take away from this? Because I saw people pointing out the other day that NC State Duke game in the men's tournament did a big number, did like a 15.
Yep.
Something along those lines was an abnormally large number for what had gone on for a side of the sport in men's college basketball that we've talked about. Hey, what's been wrong with this? Why didn't we care as much about the regular season? And you could look at that and go, hey, will the lack of Caitlin Clark mania next year during the regular season take some of the bite out of that? Or will all these young freshmen whose names we've already got to learn on big time stages in postseason basketball be enough to sustain that? And I think no matter what, again, what you've seen is when you invest in platform in these spaces, there's always been quality there. And now, because we've had added exposure, There have been great players before. There have been great freshmen before in college basketball, but because now we're getting these games on big networks, because now there's money and promotion behind it, you have ESPN investing in their studio show to help tell the story. You've had people like Holly Rowe and Rebecca Lobo, these people that have been ambassadors for the game, storytelling, so now we do feel like we have that investment. I do think no matter what it looks like, if there's a little bit of a numerical drop-off, it's a good reminder, ratings shouldn't be everything. They're a fun sign, but it's not everything. The health of this is all in a really good place.
Yeah, we talked about this going in, that the name value was more on the women's side going into the tournament over the men's side, but you talked about big numbers because, there are players we know and they have advanced, and then there are stories that jump up. And let's be honest, DJ Burns has been one of them.
Sure. Leading
a 11 seed, which is, again, the lowest seed we've ever seen get to the Final Four. They've tied a few other teams here. Plus you have a social media star and a guy on the court that everybody's now going to tune in to see, this 6'9", 275-pound guy that they say could play, maybe in the NFL, preparing for that. All of a sudden, that becomes appointment viewing. And now he's going up against Edey, the big man from Purdue, so you're like, okay, now we're getting some matchups and some names that we recognize to have more people, more of the casual fan tune in.
Yeah, I think the reasons why we can kind of try and pull out between the two, why it's been more captivating to watch some of the stories told and why maybe they've been told better about the women's game than the men's game. I think a lot of that boils down to quality. I think that baseline, you always win with quality, and everything else around that ends up becoming a garnish. So we can talk a lot more about that, but it was a cool moment, I think, overall for the way that this has gone. They're already talking about tinkering with the tournament going forward and expediting some of the changes as a result too. And I know I came on here and talked about and joked about, hey, this idea of taking the first and second round matchups away from home sites as a reward to these teams that have been higher seed, because Notre Dame's usually a higher seed. Because exactly. Like people having to come South Bend and get their ass whooped in the early rounds of the tournament. But I think we've also seen in other places in the Portland region, struggles around certain schools with the amount of hotel spacing that you need for these kind of things to happen. We saw what happened with the Utah women's team that had to deal with the racist remarks and the harassment that went on there. And so those very serious issues that now I'm sure the NCAA is going to look at and say, hey, for the betterment and part of student welfare, do we need to make sure that these are an environment that we have a little bit more control over so the student experience is better? And that's one thing, Ted, we will always advocate here, is to make sure these young people that are going out here as the center of what goes on have a comfortable enough time with this.
Yeah, we'll see what they come up with this. They've been talking about this for a bit, and now they may bring this in. I have a feeling it may go this route, where it'll be just like the men then. No home games. You're going right to a region. Supported in different places around the country. I think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, and I can understand that. Again, I think part of it's a shame because you lose this great intimate part of college athletics. College athletics is so atmosphere-based. It's so crowded. We learned that during the pandemic. Right. Even watching college football, this thing that outside of the NFL we love so much in the world, when you strip away the crowds and the bands and all the fun stuff, it's just an inherently worse product than the NFL. It's not as good of football. You need the rest of that around. And certainly college basketball falls into that same vein. I know in college football right now, we've spent a lot of time as the playoffs been expanding in our sport, warring to try and get home games in the first rounds on these college campuses to give you that atmosphere, to give you that reward for the home fan bases. And now you've got people that want to take that away in women's college basketball for X, Y, and Z reason. The ones that we've discussed here, I can understand. The ones where people are sad about going and losing a game because they don't have home court advantage, I would just encourage you to be better at basketball during the regular season. That would be my advice, but what do I know?
It's kind of the Gino Auriemma way when UConn was dominating. He just was like to everybody else, get better. We're not going to do anything to get worse, so you damn well better get better. And you know what? He was absolutely right.
And it happened. And people got better, and now the sport is better for it. And now we are talking about massive ballooning ratings for women's college basketball. So congratulations to everybody associated with the coverage on that, because that was truly a rising tide that lifted all ships. Coming up next, speaking of getting better, though, one team in the NFL took that very seriously this offseason. How high can the Tennessee Titans climb? Next.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. The Tennessee Titans are digging deep into the pockets this offseason. $306.4 million they have spent in free agency and extensions. They introduced L'Jarius Sneed, their new corner, this week. Calvin Ridley, of course, the big signing. You have Cushenberry, the center from the Broncos, and Tony Pollard to help out with the ground game. But I didn't mean to just gloss over Ridley, because that was really the big splash, and it was a big surprise to a lot of people, because we thought maybe the Jags, maybe the Patriots, but no, that wasn't the case. Brent Carthon gave us some insight as to how the deal got done.
We get the deal done, the deal gets agreed to. So we're in the office, we're having a moment. And, in this particular moment, it was myself, it was Chad, it was Callie, and Nick Holtz. So we're high-fiving and bro-hugging and doing all of that. And so we were like, hey, let's get Calvin on the phone. Let's congratulate him. So we literally, this is all happening within 90 seconds. We call Calvin, we're FaceTiming him, and we're excited, and he's excited. And then my phone beeps, and it's Miss Amy. And I pick up the phone, and I'm like, hello? And she's like, is this true? And I'm like, is what true? And she was like, did we just get Calvin Ridley? And I'm like, what the hell? Like, is it out already? It's been like, I was like, we're on the phone with him right now, congratulating him that we got this done.
Well, Mr. General Manager, we were all just as surprised taking a look at the AFC odds. The Titans, though, plus 650, the longest in the division. Texans plus 135, Jags plus 240, Colts plus 330. Let's talk about this, guys. Should the gap be that big, GoJo?
I think so, just because they have so many variables on this team right now. Like, you're talking about a new coaching regime that comes in replacing one that was really well thought of in what you had in the prior outfit here. And so I think combine that with a young quarterback going into his second year as a starter now in Will Levis, and the fact that you've got all these new pieces you're going to have to try and gel together, I think this is rightly positioned. Shane Steichen and what he showed early last year, even with Anthony Richardson injured in Indianapolis, gives them a leg up. Obviously, the Houston Texans are a team we're going to talk about maybe towards the season being more in that Super Bowl contender mode than just a team that could surprise us and make the playoffs. Certainly, the Jags are always a team with Trevor Lawrence. We're waiting to kind of make that next step and take that next push. And so, yeah, Dan, I think they're kind of appropriately positioned, but they had money to spend, and they went out and spent it this offseason on some of the best parts that you could find around.
Well, they did, and the last thing you said there is always, to me, the interesting one. You're buying parts, and you're hoping the parts can come together to create the machine that you need.
Yep.
But a lot of times, you're just getting parts that end up not fitting together. So you wait and see, and so because of that, Claudia gives the numbers they give, and there's the distance there. So I understand that until we see if they start to click. For me in Tennessee, what did Mike Vrabel always have? He always had a tough defense.
Yeah.
I'm wondering where that side of the ball is going to go now to have that Mike Vrabel influence over it. Because offensively, listen, you needed this help, and a lot of people are going to look at, oh my God, Calvin Ridley was overpaid. We said the same thing about, remember when Christian Kirk went from the Cardinals to Jacksonville, overpaid, and he comes out and he played well right after that deal was signed. For Ridley, it's like, wow, that's a lot of money. But they had DeAndre Hopkins at 75 receptions, the top on the team, and he was a wide receiver. The next closest wide receiver had 28 receptions. It was wide receiver, tight end, running back. So they needed that next wide receiver, and again, sometimes you got to overpay to get it. So you make sure you get it, and they got it, they believe, with Calvin Ridley.
And they're in rookie contract area right now,
right.
So you've obviously got that money savings. You had a ton of cap space going into this offseason, and so you pair him now there with DeAndre Hopkins, who more of the possession guy, maybe opposite someone in Calvin Ridley, who, when supported, can still mimic a number one more closely than anyone else available on the market. When you zoom out even more, though, with the Titans, I think what was perplexing for a lot of people, including myself, is these felt sort of like all-in moves. L'Jarius Sneed, who they brought over, was a big-time name coming off the back-to-back Super Bowl champion Chiefs, and you pair that with where we look at them, forget even just in the South, that's kind of, when you look at the rest of the AFC, a division that's scaled way far down compared to everyone else, because the AFC East right now looks like it's going to be a division where 3 teams are vying for playoff potential. The AFC North certainly going to be in that vein as well, especially with Joe Burrow coming back this year. The AFC West is still where Patrick Mahomes lives, and now you've got 2 new coaching regimes getting going there that people have a fair amount of confidence in. And so all of a sudden you start playing out the musical chairs even in extended playoffs, and a Titans playoff run seems like a pipe dream right now.
Yeah, it does, but listen, I do think I don't think this is one of the better divisions in the league. So that's why I think that, anything could happen. And I know Houston got the 10 wins that surprised us all. Can they stay at that level or get even better? I think eventually, if the pieces can hit, it'll be a closer to division than we think.
Well, I think it'll be closer for second. I think the Texans are winning this division. I think it's theirs.
I mean, I think
that roster
theirs
combined
to lose for sure.
Yeah.
We said that about Jacksonville last year, right? Because we didn't expect this out of Houston. We're like, okay, Jacksonville, I know not great in the playoffs, but ready to take that next step. And the team that took the step over them was Houston.
I think the biggest difference, though, is it was a lot of things coming together. And you could argue, if you're the Tennessee Titans and you're looking for the most hopeful spin on this, hey, we've got a bunch of things coming together, too. You've got Brian Callahan coming over here. His father, this great offensive line coach. We've got another high pick in the draft that we expect them to spend on the offensive line to go with Peter Skoronski, who they brought last year. And so all these things together, you're like, all right, maybe Will Levis is protected. We got him another weapon here. We've got a new head coach who comes in with an offensive background that's maybe going to help grow this. Maybe we can surprise in those same ways. I still worry a little bit that that's going to require a lot from that foundation up front that is young still on that offensive line to protect a quarterback in Will Levis, who was not the kind of prospect that C.J. Stroud was. Yeah. He was a guy that a lot of people thought was a first-round quarterback that ended up falling further than a lot of us expected, but wasn't thought of nearly in the same reign of C.J. Stroud, who was in contention for the number 1 overall pick in the draft and came in and was a big driver of what happened.
I think one of the biggest differences for this team is when you see them run on offense, you don't see the king, Derrick Henry, in the backfield anymore.
Yeah, Tony Pollard, stature-wise, not going to be the same intimidation coming off the bus.
We saw the split of Henry and Spears, 280 carries to 100. Spears certainly got, share of it, but I think the split will be even closer now with Spears and Tony Pollard.
I wonder if you stacked Spears and Tony Pollard on each other and put them in a trench coat, if they would appear like one Derrick Henry out there. If you gave them a big, scary visor, probably. Yeah, Claudia, you shaking your head. I don't think you agree.
Not
I don't
even
think anyone else would
close.
agree
No,
either.
that man is a specimen.
Big, scary man.
Yeah.
Big, scary man.
Again, I think points to like the reshuffling that's gone on in the AFC. The Titans, I think as a fan, I'd be curious, at GoJo Golic on Twitter, what Titans fans are feeling right now. Maybe we'll get our buddy Ramon Foster on here, who does a great job on the radio in Nashville, covering that team a lot locally. What the sentiment is, because Dad, you've talked about this for years. As a fan base, there's always been this premium on, is our organization trying? Are they spending? Rand Carthen's come in immediately and endeared himself with quality moves last year, but now he's kind of at the helm, because all of a sudden, Vrabel was the face of that franchise. Vrabel was the one that you thought of, and now we know the GM's face a little bit more around there. It was kind of that thought that, is he going to come in and play nice? Is this going to be the person who's actually in charge of pulling the strings? Them going out and spending like this at a time where people aren't sure if they're capable of contending to that level, I wonder how that's received by a fan base that has been contenders for the recent number of years, going back to being the 1 seed 3 years ago.
I think it's huge that they see what they're doing, because I'm sure some disagreed with Vrabel being fired, but it's a new regime in here now. But all you can ask is, in the offseason, you see moves made to better your team. How much have we been on the Cowboys? They did win 12 games, where, my God, they're not doing anything, but they did win 12 games, even though they got embarrassed in the playoffs. But you see a under 500 team making moves. That's all you can hope for in the offseason.
Yeah, I think, again, I give them credit for doing what they did with what they had. I just am not sure how much it nets them, Claudia, and the odds, I think, reflect that.
Let me ask you guys this then. 6 wins last year. 6.5 is the line set for this season, which means they just need one more win. And it's decent value if you think this spending will turn out to be something good, because it's plus 125 to the over. Either of you gambling on that?
Yeah, I don't have a lot of faith in that division. I think it is Houston's division to lose. I agree with that. but it's still now great first year. Now it's a second year. Do all the pieces still work together? Do they take that next step? We've already seen a Jacksonville team falter. To me, that division isn't great, so I will take the over.
To me, Houston is unimpeachable. To me, it's more about Jacksonville and Indianapolis. What happens with those two teams, and how do the wins distribute amongst that bottom three in that division where you're playing all those guys twice in a given year? And oh, by the way, we'll see if anyone can pick Callahan out of a lineup in the annual NFL coaches picture. He seems very Zach Taylor-esque in that regard. Coming up next, though, let's talk about coaches you can identify, and one that got his flowers in a big way on a big platform yesterday.
Is the place that coaches go to be and apparently leave to be great, because take a look at the coach of the month. Ime Udoka, who used to be the coach for the Boston Celtics, now with the Rockets, is the coach of the West this month. In the East, it's Joe Mazzula of the Celtics. However, if we take a look at the odds for coach of the year, yeah, great payout, but they're not anywhere near the favorite. That would go to the head coach of the Oklahoma City Thunder. There we go, Mark Daigneault. I was caught up on that name. It is French. It's hard to say. But he is the heavy favorite, minus 350. You know, it's like those words mess up the easy words. He's the heavy favorite, guys, at minus 350. And look at those odds. If you want to go Mazzula, 30 to 1, I should say, plus 3,000. So 100 wins to 3,000, not bad. Udoka's all the way there at the bottom. Carlisle and Pacers, the longest odds. So great payout for those two guys, but nowhere near the favorite here.
Yeah, I can totally empathize with what happened with Claudia there. I had to surprise read from the Bible at my nephew's baptism last year. Oh. Let me tell you, when you're starting to prepare for like Ephesians and all those Bible words, the word "the" can all of a sudden become the one that you trip over on the way to the finish line when you've geared up like that. And so Daigneault, who Another coach couldn't pick out of a lineup if I tried. He's the coach of one of the best teams in the Western Conference, absolutely deserving of this. A man whose name you would struggle to remember on any given day and certainly struggle to see and pick out of a lineup at any given time. So, Dad, I do think, obviously, the irony of this, Ime being the coach that was there, and we know wasn't fired for any sort of normal reasons. This was a bit of the abstract in terms of why he's no longer there. But that side by side with Joe Mazzula, who all we've talked about with the Boston Celtics is, how did you lose 2 games to the Hawks in that stretch? And what does this mean for your postseason future? Him being handed Coach of the Month in the Eastern Conference there. I don't know if that's Alanis Morissette irony or regular irony, but it's something and it feels funny.
Yeah, it does. It's just, listen, a check mark obviously for him, but the same worries still apply to Boston. What's going to go on in the postseason? Nothing changes. They have been constant in that thought process there. So nothing's changed there. With Houston, it was interesting because they were making a run. They had won 8 in a row. And since that point, they've lost their next 2. So I think that race is over. As we talked about the 9-10 matchup with the Lakers and the Warriors have a 3-game lead on Houston for that number 10 slot, that last slot in the play-ins with, as we've mentioned before, anywhere from 5 to 7 games to go. So I don't think they're going to make that move, but certainly the names of coaches of the week, it does kind of make you chuckle a little bit.
Yeah, no, but the Rockets, you're right. Great run. People wondering about what they can be next year with a lot of that young core. But a wise woman once said, this ain't Texas, ain't no Hold'em. And so I think we're going to have to put the Houston Rockets down that line a bit for right now. Speaking of props and conversations, though, props the other day for one of the better coaches in the NBA and someone whose name I feel like we don't bring up as much. We talked a lot about Joe Mazzula because, he's had some very interesting kind of quirky quotes. He went up and tried to contest the shots and he coaches the best team in basketball overwhelming. Others that we always certainly talk about, the Doc Rivers situation, the Milwaukee Bucks, a well-known name, an interesting situation here. Erik Spoelstra kind of gets left in the rearview mirror at times for a Miami Heat team that is constantly overachieving in most of our minds based on the strength of that roster overall. And so I thought it was really cool yesterday. LeBron James and JJ Redick's new podcast, Mind the Game, which is a phenomenal foray into basketball X's and O's, they took some time to really throw some flowers the way of Erik Spoelstra yesterday. Take a listen.
Spo is the reason why we were a better team and our team was more assembled properly. That summer, he went to Oregon and hung out with Chip Kelly.
Oh, interesting.
He when we lost to Dallas, he went to Oregon and hung out with Chip Kelly and learned the spread offense and tried to figure out if he could translate that to basketball.
Now, Dad, it's a really cool story, and I think what they went on to say and how that applied to actual on-court basketball was he was trying to find more space in the half court for LeBron James and that newly minted Big Three as they tried to organize them. And they said the big move for them was you had to go out there and change the way that you approach the 5 spot. You had to change the way that you space the court for a guy like LeBron James to go out there and do that. And so I think seeing that innovative approach is just another way that underscores a guy that in Erik Spoelstra didn't get a lot of credit at that point back then because we looked at the Big Three and said, hey, he's along for the ride. Look at his way up here. There's no way he's possibly influencing this situation. And boy, have time and history now been on Spo's side as someone who has gone and proven himself to be, right up there talked about with Greg Popovich as the consensus name for best coach usually in the league.
This is a guy cutting film years ago, right? You started working with the Heat in 97, 97 to 08, he was an assistant. Obviously, when he first got there, just as we said, in the film room, and then been the head coach since 08. And I think the thought, Mike, because like you said, when you get the Big Three together where you have the players doing it, but also on the other side, it was always thought that the Pat Riley fingerprints were always all over it. So you were caught between the great players on the court and then Pat Riley, overseeing you were just kind of what people thought the puppet in the middle of all this, but he's just been there over and over doing it to the point of, you're right. I don't think he gets recognized enough. And when LeBron James is talking about what he meant and what he did and how he did from a coaching standpoint help this team, that's a big time check mark for you.
And I think when you look, this is, I think part of the reason, and we talked about at different points along the way, how the coverage of professional basketball has not often involved a lot of this more specific X and O's conversation that these guys are seeking to fill here. But you hear them talk about, putting Chris Bosh in the corner, putting him in the 5, and then spacing him in the corner for LeBron James. You've seen other guys that have since come up and talked about this saying, that kind of was what set the course for modern basketball on the path it's gone down now. Paul George, they pulled a clip from his podcast the other day where he said that was how you beat the Indiana Pacers back then, where you had Roy Hibbert and David West on that team, where you were still dealing with traditional bigs. We've talked about all the things that have ushered in this new world of the NBA, where you get the Giannis's, you eventually get to guys like Wemby. Was that move to where now all of a sudden it's, hey, Chris Bosh, we need you in the lab shooting corner threes every day after practice. We need this to be something in your game so that we can change the spacing around this. And it netted us probably the best basketball of LeBron James's career during that run with the Miami Heat. Certainly a couple of championships for them. But now the ripple effects to this move that all trace back to this man in Eric Spoelstra, Dad, it just kind of underscores again the value that a great coach can have. And in basketball, I think that's something as a public we struggle with more than most sports, where the fingerprints of these guys find their way, because they're all hired and fired usually so quickly.
And this is like a Pittsburgh Steeler-esque of just leaving a coach and letting him do his thing, and certainly should get the due that he deserves. But also you got to have players that buy in, right? Chris Bosh had to buy into this. They had to figure it out. Was LeBron, acquiescing to Dwayne Wade, who was going to be the man, until you realize it's LeBron. But then Bosh has to buy into, okay, I'm part of the big three, but now you're making this piece. Well, I have to buy into it, and he did buy into it. As LeBron said, there was never any pushback from Chris Bosh about that.
Yeah, so I think as we have all of these conversations about the current NBA Coach of the Year odds and stuff like that, if you're doing a list of the best coaches, period, in the NBA right now, you're not getting out of the top 3 without bringing up Eric Spoelstra's name.
Yep.
And that's easy to see, I think, from just the records, from the normal eye test stuff that we see right here. And I think, again, this is why this podcast is such a good force in the basketball sphere, where all of these things, we had this conversation after JJ Redick was critical on First Take of the format there. You can have everything. The media space is big enough for you to have big talking head shows where you can yell and scream about rings plus minus and some of the general stuff and some of the fun stuff around sports. But you can also have one of the greatest basketball players of all time taking us inside his brain with JJ Redick, who's also a great basketball mind, and saying, no, this is the thing that you guys all missed about what went on here. And I'm sure, we're going to, talk to Zach Harper, our buddy, coming up here soon about some of what's going on in the NBA. I'm sure Zach, our buddy Amin El-Hassan, a lot of these guys that live and breathe around the sport, they can appreciate that, but there's probably a huge portion of the general basketball watching audience that had no idea that, this changed so much for the league that you watch now.
It's become a constant, right? That of what he has done in Miami, that you almost take it for granted and don't give him his due. When every now and then, I guess you got to pump the brakes and say, wait a minute, look what he's doing out there. But like I said, he had it from both sides, from a player side, great players, and a guy running the team in Pat Riley, who were getting all, the lion's share of praise, until you finally realize, this guy's pretty good.
It also just made me remember how cool the Big Three era was in Miami. Like LeBron's brief foray into being a villain, a place where his game really evolved in a lot of ways. Tons of fun there, tons of fun here. We're just getting started. Coming up next, we'll talk to our buddy Zach Harper and look around the rest of the league here on GoJo and Golic. All right, welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr., Claudia Bellafato here for hour number 2 of the show. And excited to bring in someone to help us talk a little bit more basketball in this hour of the show as well. We'll still get you updated on our Starch Madness brackets and everything of that ilk. But Zach Harper, kind enough to join us now. You can read him over at The Athletic. You can listen to him on SiriusXM NBA Radio. Zach, good morning, man. How you doing?
I'm excellent. How are you guys doing?
Doing well.
Doing well, man. Doing well. We got certainly a lot to get to today. I think the headliner for everyone last night, Joel Embiid finally makes his triumphant return in Philadelphia. They get a win over Oklahoma City, albeit without SGA. But what were you looking for going into this game, and what did you take away from his first appearance back on court?
I don't want to be dramatic. I was just looking for please don't get hurt. That's all I was looking for. Like, just please don't get hurt. I love watching Joel Embiid play. The NBA is better when this giant is out there patrolling everything. It's funny. Jared Greenberg asked him after the game, 30 minutes, haven't played in 2 months. How do you feel? And he said, not good. He said, not good. Like, because he looked like I'm imagining how you guys looked after 2 or 3 days in the summer. Like, he looked like he was ready to throw up. But he played really well. He turned the ball over a little bit, but he scored. He moved the ball well. There were times where he didn't get back on offense, which, there are a lot of times where I didn't get back on defense back in the day. So it was a little bit of a opposite there, but yeah, like, I think it went about as well as it could have. They beat a Thunder team that were missing their 2 best players, but still a very good team. And that's a quality win. And now they have the easiest schedule the rest of the season. These final 6 games, the absolute easiest schedule imaginable. So, maybe they can move up.
Yeah, he finished 24 points, 6 rebounds, 7 assists, 3 steals, and you mentioned he had the turnover issue. He did have 6 turnovers, and at times, and not shockingly, he looked winded, but bulky brace on your knee, you haven't played in 8 weeks. That's expected, so you'd think, you're just going to get, a little bit better and better each time. Off the court, how much do we think the 76ers may get fined for having him listed as out and then playing within 2 hours last night, which doesn't seem to really jive with the league's rules?
Yeah, it's weird because, he's listed as out until like 20 minutes before, and yet everyone knew he was going to play. I don't know how this stuff happens. It's just a miracle, everyone knew 2 days before that he was going to play. Yeah, it's I'm sure the NBA, as they're still navigating the world of being embraced with sports gambling, I'm sure they're still trying to figure out, like, hey guys, just a reminder, I don't know if you guys saw the memo, we need these injury report updates to be accurate. I think that's going to go out to the league, and maybe it's a little bit of a slap on the wrist for the Sixers.
Yep, little reminder that we have to do things a certain way right now. Speaking of little reminders, though, I don't know if this qualifies as little. Is losing to the Wizards a cry for help now? Should we be a lot more worried about the Milwaukee Bucks than I think people have previously been?
Look, I've killed Doc a lot over the years because I think he tries to get away with being folksy to mask some coaching inadequacies, right? And everyone does the Doc Rivers press conference laugh where he'll say something mildly funny and everyone erupts in laughter because that's what you got to do as a media member. And so I would normally kill him for a comment like that, but he was asked about what's going on with their road stuff recently, and he essentially said, I'm paraphrasing, he was like, everybody, not just the players, but like support staff, everyone has to have more professionalism. I've been sitting back and taking notes. And again, normally I would kill something like that. except they lost to the Wizards. And that makes me think that there's something to this. The Wizards are the least serious team in any sport I've ever seen. And to go out there and be a title contender and lose on the road, you could say it's just one game. They didn't have Dame, all that stuff. Well, they had Giannis and they had not the Wizards players. So that is a cry for help. It is something we should be concerned with. It is something where, look, the defense isn't fixed and they need to just figure out what that championship level of basketball is going to be, and they don't have a lot of time to figure that out.
Because we are a recent history biased society right now, lest we forget, Adrian Griffin was the coach of the Bucks when this season started. He was 30-13 and got fired. Doc is 17-15. So yeah, things have gone the wrong way here. So that being said, not much we can trust there. Boston, clearly the best team in the East, but we know about their playoff, woes at times. So outside of those two teams, is it Cleveland at 3, or is there another team that you could say, could make that surprise run in the East?
Yeah, I don't trust Cleveland either. I was big on them last year. They're the best defense in the league last year, and then they got to the playoffs and it just got absolutely stomped by a Knicks team that was good, but not that good. Not good enough to make them look as foolish as they did. And so I don't trust Cleveland, even as talented as they are. I got to see it in the playoffs before I believe it. I mean, I think if this Knicks team can get healthy, they're really good. It's a lot of high IQ basketball on the court on both ends of the floor. They have a lot of different ways that they can play when they're healthy. OG Anunoby changed so much for them. I like the Knicks to be able to challenge. And look, it's going to annoy everybody. It annoys them every year. You have to worry about the Heat. You just do. Like, they just find a way to be the most annoying team to the rest of the Eastern Conference. Jimmy Butler's going to needle you. They're going to play great defense. Spo's going to outcoach you. You have to worry about the Heat. But anyone else on top of that, Orlando's really good, but they're too young. Indiana doesn't really play defense, and Halliburton hasn't been the same since a hamstring injury. At Philadelphia, I wasn't buying before the Sixers, before the Embiid injury, and so I still think that they're an incomplete team. So it's pretty much, will the Celtics screw this up? Which maybe.
Yeah, I say the answer is always, unfortunately, maybe with this current core right now. I want to circle back because you talked about the Knicks, and I think every time we in the national sports talk business think about a deep Knicks playoff run potentially, we all start to celebrate because we know how good for that the bottom line that is. But I do wonder, because we heard Josh Hart come out the other day talk about the guys he wasn't sure were going to be back or how soon. You mentioned injury is the biggest factor there. How soon, if that keeps up and if that affects the top end of the season, do we start having the Tibbs conversation again, where we're looking at the minutes these guys are playing deep into blowouts and the effect that this has over the course of a long season, time and time again with this coach?
Yeah, I was watching the Thunder Knicks game the other day, and on the broadcast they say, Deuce McBride and Josh Hart and Dante DiVincenzo haven't checked out in the second half yet. And I looked, and there's like 2 minutes left in the fourth quarter. I was like, Tibbs, what are you doing? Like, what? Like, this is just crazy. He does not care. He's just like, I've got 6 guys I'm going to play tonight, and that's it. And the rest of them can deal with it. And these guys are professional athletes, and they're in shape, and they're going to play 45, 46 minutes. Yeah, like, it's always going to be a conversation with him, right? I don't know if you can blame the current injuries. Like, OG had an elbow problem, right? This isn't knee ligaments or anything. It's an elbow issue with tendonitis, I believe, that has flared up. I think the concerning thing is that it's not healed like they thought it would be by now. A dislocated shoulder for Julius Randle. I don't think that's a Tibbs issue, but the wear and tear is there, man. Like, it just is, and it's something you have to worry about. They seem to be handling it well right now, but as long as Tibbs is on the sidelines scowling and screaming with that raspy voice to ice and ice and ice, I don't know if he's talking about his players' knees or pick and roll coverages, but he's yelling ice no matter what.
He is something else, man. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Going over to the West, long range before we get to what's happening at the top and certainly at the 9-10 slot as well. San Antonio, we have seen Wemby just, living up and just being amazing us. So being there and being the worst record in the West, how long does it take an NBA team with a guy like that and the possibilities they can have to build to where we're talking about them in one of the automatic slots in the top 6 in the West?
Yeah, it's kind of what everyone's wondering now, right? Is how long until this is a problem for everybody else? And it could be very quick. They've got a lot of roster flexibility that they can have this summer. So if they want to be aggressive and going to get players, they can. It's funny. I was talking about this the other day with some people, and Wemby might be the guy, because most time you have a promising young player and veterans like, guy's young. Let's wait for him to grow up before I'm going to go be on his team. You've got guys now like, I kind of want to be a part of this, like right away. This is becoming a thing. I actually ran the numbers last night because I was just curious. I was like, all right, if he doesn't get any better than this, right? He just holds these averages for the next 15 years. And after 15 years, he decides, I'm done. He plays 70 games a season. He would end up with, I think it was 22,000 points, 11,000 rebounds, 3,700 assists, 3,500 blocks, which has never been done before. If you take away the blocks, then it's like Wilt and Kareem and LeBron and Charles Barkley, like Kevin Garnett, Tim Duncan. It's that group of players. If you remove the assists and keep the blocks, it's only Hakeem. It's what he's doing is literally unprecedented. You could be like, that's just numbers, and yes, it is just numbers. And the team sucks right now. They're 40 games under 500. It's not crazy. We don't have to wait to wonder, like, is this guy going to end up as one of the greatest players of all time? Like, yeah, there's injuries, but he is becoming such a force that we've never seen before. I expect it to be a quick rebuild because I think players are just going to want to, like, you know how little you have to try on defense to be on his team, and it's okay. He just blocks everything, but they're not even challenging him, and he's blocking everything. Like, it's ridiculous. People are literally running away with the ball when he's in the paint. It's incredible.
It is hilarious to watch a near quadruple double almost again last night against the defending champion Nuggets and Nikola Jokic. How soon are we talking about him as the best player in the NBA? Like, how soon is that a real conversation with him?
Yeah, I don't want to be like too in the moment, right? Because Jokic is 29 and
sure.
Still just unbeatable. But I don't know, like, realistically, maybe conservatively 3 years. Like, when he hits around 23, I would be shocked if he's not the best player in the league.
It's absolutely
amazing, isn't it?
Absolutely terrifying to see what he's already become there. But like we said, they're last place in the Western Conference right now, so they're not going to factor in to what we have coming up soon. I want to circle out to Los Angeles, not the Lakers, but the Clippers. Kawhi Leonard gets sent back to Los Angeles to get some treatment for knee soreness the other night. Are we right to start raising the alarms for a Clippers team where this was always the worry heading into the postseason?
Always. If you're asking, is it right to raise the alarm about the Clippers? The answer is always. It doesn't matter what the situation is. It's just unfortunately where they are. I mean, James Harden is an incredible player. Got a weird history in elimination games where he doesn't really show up, and he has these awful games where he's just kind of checked out, and that's a concern. Paul George, an amazing player, having one of the best seasons of his career, playing some of the best defense we've ever seen from him, which is saying something because he's an incredible defender. He's got weird stuff in the playoffs. Like, I've seen him be outplayed by Joe Ingles in a series before, right? Like, it's weird. No offense to Joe Ingles. The thing that made me believe in these Clippers, despite all the factors and all the Clippersdom ahead of us, was Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi looked great. He looked healthy. And when Kawhi is healthy, I think you can make the argument he's the second best player in the league just about any day of the week behind Jokic. And if that knee is getting sore, it'd be one thing if it was an ankle injury or something, but it's the knee. And if that knee is getting sore, maybe it's just management. Maybe it's just trying to be cautious and making sure you get him to the postseason, because that's always the conversation with the Clippers. If we just get Kawhi to the postseason, all this other stuff is worth it. And it still could be true. But man, like, you see that he's sent home and it's knee soreness and everything. And I just thought, oh, here we go again. Like, I just want to see it once with the Clippers. I'm not saying they have to win the championship. I just want to see the healthy Clippers squad throughout whatever length of playoff run they have.
So looking at the top of the West, a half game separating Oklahoma City, Minnesota, and Denver. So we all are looking forward to the first play-in game with the Lakers and Golden State. It looks more and more like where the spacing is that's going to happen. So the possibility of one of those teams being the 8th seed, should any of those three teams actually have a big-time worry that, we can get knocked off in the first round by either the Lakers or Golden State?
Yeah, I don't think Denver would even be aware of who their opponent is, right? I think
Right.
Denver is so
Right.
far ahead
I
of
agree.
everybody. As long as
I
they
agree
get
with that. Yeah.
As long as they can get Jamal Murray healthy, I think it won't matter. And even if Jamal Murray's a little banged up and misses some of that first round, it still might not matter. The Thunder's an interesting one because we talk about them with all this praise, and it's deserved. They're really, really good on both ends of the floor. They're super young. They won 40 games last year and did not make the playoffs. So this is a massive leap to go from that to possibly the best team in the West. So I think they maybe need to be a little bit worried about these two teams that have incredible experience and championship experience. The Timberwolves, they probably need to worry more about getting healthy. And Anthony Edwards is just that guy. Like I don't think he's worried about anything. There's some weird stuff with Rudy Gobert in postseasons, but that might have had to do with him and Donovan Mitchell not liking each other. Like you never know what that stuff was, but with the Timberwolves, like, yeah, you got to be a little bit worried. The Thunder, a little bit worried. Denver, I don't even know if they'll be awake.
Yeah, and you know what? And earned at this point, right? Like I think we've almost put Denver off to the side as we've talked about Boston and some of their postseason concerns. Denver, it's just sort of crockpot. We said it and forget it right now. And that seems to be the case with the MVP too. Current DraftKings Sportsbook odds have Jokic as the overwhelming favorite for the MVP. Luka's right there in second behind him. Is there any argument to be made for Luka as the MVP this year, or are we just handing this off to Jokic and give him another one for the cupboard?
Yeah, I mean, Luka's been incredible, right? Like, there's some of the stuff he's done. Look, this is one play, so you can't base an MVP up. He had a 21-foot layup the other night. Jabari Smith Jr. played perfect defense, and he just dips under and throws up a 21-foot layup, and it goes in, and everyone laughs. And I would have punched him, like I just would, like, and he didn't do anything wrong. Like, you can't allow that. You can't be okay with that. In the '80s, they would have knocked him on his butt. But Luka's been unbelievable. Like the stuff he's doing, the stuff he does at the end of games, it all matters. But Jokic is like, he's just clearly the best player, clearly the most valuable. The splits with him on and off are still absurd. And he is the reason that it doesn't matter if Jamal Murray's hurt right now. It doesn't matter if guys are in and out of the lineup. As long as he's there, you have a great chance of winning. And maybe it's voter fatigue a little bit. Maybe it's trying to just make things interesting by saying, hey, maybe Luka, hey, maybe Shea. It's Jokic, man. Like I'm a voter, luckily, and I'm having a hard time making an argument for anybody other than him.
A team kind of stuck in the middle that we don't talk a lot about is New Orleans, holding on to the sixth slot right now by a game over Sacramento. And Zion leading the team, I think just under 24 points a game in that area there. But a lot said about Zion. Is he in shape? Does he need to lose weight? There's some of the off-field things that were going on and the turmoil with him in New Orleans. Is that over? Are they square down there? Is this the team that they continue to build with?
Yeah, I think the majority of their problems are just health and maybe some basketball stuff. Like I think in terms of like, is Zion want to be here? Like I don't think they have any concerns with that. He seems pretty locked in. He's playing point forward for them, and that's been an unstoppable thing. His defense, my buddy Mo Dakhil had a great breakdown of his defensive improvements lately. That this is a great defensive team. It's just is Zion still going to be healthy when the playoffs come? Is Brandon Ingram going to get healthy when the playoffs come? That's really the two questions you have about them, because they have great supporting cast. They're deep. Willie Green's a hell of a coach. They're good on defense. They're pretty good on offense, but I think that's mostly injuries. I think they'd be a lot better if they had Ingram in there full time. But yeah, like this New Orleans team's interesting because they have all the makings of someone who could make a deep run in the West, disrupt a lot of teams' playoff hopes. But it's just, man, it's always something with injuries with them, right? Like there's a little bit of Clippers in the Pelicans. Like, it's always something you have to just say with the qualifier if they're healthy. And unfortunately, we're still at that stage with them.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the stage. We talked about this before that we're in overall with single-digit games left in the season. You're looking around at everyone right now in terms of playoff positioning going, all right, who is healthy when, and is that going to peak at the right time for some of these teams to go out here and accomplish what we hope that they can? At Talk Hoops on Twitter is where you can check them out. Again, you can read them over at The Athletic and listen to them, SiriusXM NBA Radio. Zach, always a pleasure, man. We appreciate it, and hopefully we'll get to talk to you again soon as we get ready for some postseason basketball.
Thanks, fellas. Anytime.
Thanks, Zach. I'm loving the race in, we always look for different races. We're talking about the top of the West. But 5, 6, 7, 8 in the West. So that's two locks, 5 and 6, and then the play in 7 and 8. between Dallas at 5 and Phoenix at 8, only one game separates of all four teams. So that's still a pretty, and New Orleans is on a 2-game losing streak. Dallas lost our last game while both Sacramento and Phoenix have won recently. So could that flip-flop before the end of the season?
Yeah, I think in talking to Zach there, you can clearly see, hey, the Eastern Conference is a lot more what-ifs. It's a lot more teams that look like they might be a year away from this, whereas the West all of a sudden has some really compelling teams in that range you just described who've either got some playoff experience or an incredible star player that could all of a sudden make that playoff picture outside of the looming final boss of the Nuggets maybe a little bit easier.
Dallas playing, I think, the best of those teams I just mentioned. I would expect them to hang on, I think, to where they are, being 5 or 6, especially with Luka. That friggin',
that underhand 21-foot layup was one of the funniest highlights you'll see all year.
I mean, seriously.
That is Luka Doncic.
I'm Luka. I'm throwing this up and it'll go in.
That is what you look for in a star player, regardless of sport. Coming up next, we will look ahead at more of the star players playing quarterback heading into the NFL draft, and one that continues to rise up draft boards and get all the buzz next.
I think it's an okay question to ask. Is there really an offseason in NFL? Because we stay busy with speculation, overreacting, and of course with the draft coming up, making thousands and thousands and thousands of mock drafts. And lately, JJ McCarthy's name is rising to the top of those. So here's one from Tony Paulino of Sportskeeda.com. He says, New England, JJ McCarthy of Michigan. I'm not a big fan of McCarthy being a top 10 selection, but the UM signal caller to New England was the buzz on the pro day circuit. De facto general manager Elliott Wolf is pushing hard for McCarthy, and he believes he has as much upside as any quarterback in the draft. Colin Cowherd, though, doesn't think this would be a good fit for Gerard Mayo's first season at the helm.
We know of these top 5 or 6. 2 are not going to work. We know it right now. And I've said I think Caleb's good enough to overcome. Everybody else will be as good as where they land. I think J.J. McCarthy in New England is a bust. I think J.J. McCarthy in Minnesota with that talent and coach, that division, which is light on defense, heavy on scoring, works. If I said to you, give me two that have...
A bust. That's all I heard out of Colin Cowherd's mouth. I mean, it's really hard to, and I think not just being a New England fan, but for anybody to look at this team's quarterback situation last year and think that any quarterback coming in is going to be a bust. But I do understand what he's saying. First-year head coach for Mayo, not really having the weapons around him, not knowing what else the draft is going to look like for them. It's not a good situation for J.J. McCarthy, but is he going to be a bust senior? I don't know if that's the right word to use for this.
Oh, that's tough to call a bust right out of the gate. But what he has said and what I have said and what we've seen, the sampling size is there. There are going to be 5 quarterbacks and 2 or 3 are going to bust. And I can't sit here and pick which ones are going to bust. I don't know that, but time has told us that's going to happen. We both have thought J.J. McCarthy has been moving. We were surprised it was first round. Now the projections are Minnesota trading up to get this guy in the top 5. I still don't see it as much as others do. But listen, I've been right about some quarterbacks. I've been wrong about some quarterbacks. Kind of just like the teams have been over the years, is you pick ones you think are going to hit and ones that you're not sure about. J.J. McCarthy has been a guy I've not been sure about.
J.J. McCarthy is a guy that's going to need a little bit more time. I think that's what we all imagine. It's a reps problem. There's ability there, and that's what's enticing to people, but it's a reps problem in the areas of quarterback, mainly having to throw the ball a ton, that are going to be the difference maker. And what I agree with Colin, and I think, Claudia, there's a reaction to the word bust, because in my mind, bust implies the player failed. And what Colin's talking about here, and I think what most of us have had a larger conversation about more lately, is no, this is a situational bust. This is a team that is not capable of bringing in and has to be honest with the kind of player they can bring in at this point in their life cycle as a team. And so at that point, I think he's right. I do think Minnesota is much more capable of bringing in a player like J.J. McCarthy, because you've got a Sam Darnold there, maybe using that to help wean that player into it, knowing, hey, I got one of the best receivers in the NFL, if not outright the best wide receiver in Justin Jefferson, who's a hell of a security blanket for a young player in an offense that's also a branch of the Shanahan-McVay stuff that is pretty quarterback solvent and helps these guys out early, versus New England, where this is all going to be new for them and they don't have a roster that's nearly as ready, much like we saw with Carolina last year, to support a young quarterback.
But we also saw Houston. Did we think Houston had a rookie top defensive lineman, Will Anderson, the number 2 quarterback? They didn't have a running game. Did we think Tank Dell and Nico Collins were going to do what they did as well? You had a first-time head coach and you had a first-time play caller as well. And they surprised. I'm not sitting here and saying New England's going to do that, and we saw Carolina go the other way on that. That's why I keep saying Houston's the exception to the rule, but other owners see that and say, if it happened there, why can't it happen here? Because you're right. You look at Houston and you say, well, they just don't have the weapons. But before the season started last year and we were breaking down divisions, did anybody have Houston winning it? And was anybody saying, you know what, they could surprise with the talent that they have? No, none of us were saying that, and yet they still did it.
Yeah, you know who Houston didn't have in the division? The Bills, Dolphins, and Jets.
I agree. I completely agree.
I part of that is shame on us for, I think, not looking closely enough at that Houston roster maybe going into last year. And you're right. But also, this bears repeating, J.J. McCarthy is not C.J. Stroud. Not comparable prospects. Not talked about in the same way in the lead up to this, Claudia. At least in my mind, the way we talked about C.J. and the way that we're talking about J.J., and that's the point that I think Colin was making about Caleb Williams, is C.J. is much more in that mold of a quarterback than he is a guy like J.J. McCarthy.
Well, that too, and I'm thinking back to Senior's comment on Tank Dell. In my eyes, it's almost like that was a fresh start for that team. There was a lot of young talent there. We didn't know what the ceiling looked like. It appeared to be, it did. It was a lot higher than we thought. The issue with the New England is they brought back all of these players where we sort of already know the situation with them, and they didn't look good last year. And, Pop Douglas was your best receiver, which was wildly concerning. Hunter Henry, your tight end, basically was your most reliable receiver. Like, we know that's what we're getting again this year. So I think that was the biggest concern for me. I was high on the Texans. I was really high on CJ Stroud. I'm not going to, blow smoke on that one. But I did think the ceiling was higher with them, knowing what we were getting with New England.
Especially knowing their first-round picks, Will Anderson Jr., legitimate culture changer, defensive rookie of the year, all that stuff seemed accessible there. They had drafted well on the back end, Derek Stingley Jr. Tank Dell was someone that a lot of people were excited about, but I think overall, it's also about trajectory. What they were coming off of was the remnants of a real bad time down there with Deshaun Watson and the end of that regime and that franchise there, the front office that had to get a lot changed over, versus New England that's coming off the greatest two-decade run maybe in the history of pro sports, and at the very least the NFL, and is having to sort through a swing and miss on their first round quarterback with a roster, to Claudia's point, that doesn't stack up on paper.
My thought only is the team did better than we expected in Houston. They did better than we expected. I was just trying to give Claudia some hope, but I think New England is screwed. I think they're in a lot of trouble. I know. I was trying. Because it can happen occasionally, like it did with Houston. But it's ugly in New England.
This is what makes New England a very interesting trade back candidate.
Yes,
I understand.
I agree.
It sounds like they're going to stick there. It sounds like from what we've heard from Gerard Mayo publicly, which could be a smokescreen, could be all that. You're in Marvin Harrison Jr. range if you want to continue to build out for the future, but it makes them a very interesting cog with that third spot overall. And I think this is also, too, an interesting larger conversation around the things that benefit young quarterbacks the most. When we look at Jaden Daniels, Drake May, Caleb Williams, we've talked so much about the environment in Chicago that he's going in. You look at other quarterbacks that have had successful rookie season. You think Dak Prescott, you think RG3, Andrew Luck, Russell Wood, the ones that are like the premier ones of the last decade, and the things that have been commonalities there. I mean, with Dak Prescott, you're talking about 2016 Dallas offensive line, probably the best in that iteration of the Cowboys, and you had rookie Zeke Elliott coming in too. That was one of the better rushers in the league right there. CJ Stroud, we talked about all the pieces that came together. I think largely protection-based too. Russell Wilson coming into Seattle with the Legion of Boom burgeoning on the other side of the ball. Like, you can look back and start to see, all right, here are some things that helped other young players be successful. Which of these teams that we're talking about near the top actually have some of those parts that might be able to mimic that?
Yeah. And some of those you get top picks, and others, like a Russell Wilson or Dak Prescott, remember, they weren't first-round guys.
Yeah, exactly.
So they were able to go to better teams or had better, stackable things for them. And you look at the first four teams here, they're all building, right? I mean, the Bears are building, but we think they're building well. Washington had a bunch of signings in the offseason. Again, a ton of pieces. They're throwing it all up against the wall to see what can stick together. Then New England is New England. We know how much they faltered since the Tom Brady era. And that, the Cardinals, they're not going to go quarterback. But if Minnesota trades up, we like that offense. And you have, your eyes sparkle if you're a quarterback saying, please let me go there because I have Justin Jefferson. So a lot of this up at the top of that draft, you're getting thrown in with teams that are trying to rebuild.
Yeah, so I do think Colin's right. I think in particular, J.J. McCarthy would be a bad fit for New England, but we know Minnesota's waiting in the wings arm with 2 first-round picks. We know the Raiders could still be in business here. We know the Broncos are going to still need a quarterback, and so there's all these contenders as we get later and later into this and get loaded up with mock drafts right now. They're going to make this home stretch before the NFL draft. We are now inside a month, folks. We made it. We are so close to the promised land, but that doesn't mean we are done speculating. Coming up next, though, the NFL, not the only place speculating right now. Major League Baseball with an interesting tinfoil hat situation and an update on our Starch Madness bracket. Next on GoJo and Golic.
We're back with a Starch Madness update, and I'm so happy to see when the crowd agrees with me because I think this was misseeded, all right? The Blizzard with a 3 seed up against the Frosty, the 1 seed, and it was total domination. The Blizzard, almost 74% of you voted the correct way, if you ask me. Voting continues, though. The final Eat 8, another 1-3 matchup. Taco Bell Baja Blast versus the Sonic Cherry Limeade in the drinks region. And I have to be honest, I've never had either of them, so I will send this one to you, GoJo. I feel like we always hear about Baja Blast.
I mean, it's part of my personal lore. My body is, probably 70% water like the earth, but I'd say a decent chunk of that, maybe 20 to 30% at this point in my life, is the Baja Blast. And so I expect this one to clean shop here, but I expected the Wendy's Frosty to get a lot more respect in the dessert region than it got yesterday as we look to crown the best fast food item in the world in this bracket. We've gone through sides, we've gone through mains. Dessert, that one surprised me a little bit, Dad. I know you guys are both high on the Blizzard. I love the Blizzard, but I always thought the Wendy's Frosty, maybe it was partially nostalgia, maybe it's my personal connection that overshot.
See, I went nostalgia with the double quarter pounder with cheese, and that got beat, and I picked against it. I picked the Chick-fil-A spicy chicken sandwich. So I agree, Frosty was nostalgia, but DQ Blizzard is better. Claudia was right. I was right. The listeners and viewers were right about that one. So now 3 of the final 4, Foodie 4, are set with the McDonald's fries, the Chick-fil-A spicy chicken sandwich, and the DQ Blizzard waiting for, and I think it will be the Baja Blast that wins this one. That's where I'm voting anyway to finish out the Foodie 4.
This should be an outright ass whooping. I'll just say it. Frankly, the Mountain Dew Baja Blast is infinitely better than the Sonic Cherry Limeade. I've had both of these things, and I grew up lusting for Sonic. Like, I didn't have one close to me growing up in Connecticut. So when I got to college in the Midwest and got to South Bend, Indiana, I ran. I didn't walk over to Sonic to try everything that they had under the hood there. And it's great, but it ain't the Baja Blast. The Baja Blast, remember, a drink so good that Taco Bell decided to make a freaking pie out of it at their keynotes now. So, Claudia, we need you to get up to date on this. I feel like you would love the Baja Blast. Everyone loves the Baja Blast.
I need you to explain, because I feel like some of our listeners and viewers may not know what it tastes like, and you lust after, this is at Sonic? Sonic, Baja Blast.
No, the Baja Blast is a Taco Bell.
Taco Bell.
See,
Sonic
I don't
Cherry.
know my fast food. Okay, do you lust after this too? What does it taste like? Please describe it.
Oh, they're both really good.
They're both very good. Like the Sonic Cherry Limeade is just what it sounds like. It's sort of like a takeoff on some sort of like lemonade that's going to have that citrusy thing with a little bit of the cherry, which I love cherry additive into anything pretty much drink-wise, especially carbonated beverages. The Mountain Dew Baja Blast is really hard to describe in terms of like an actual taste, other than it's just take whatever you think about a normal Mountain Dew and maybe give it like 30% more of
Put it on steroids.
Yeah.
Put it on steroids.
Just crank it up a little bit. Maybe it's just like more like the simple sugar that they're putting in or something like that.
Yeah.
But
healthy.
you know what? At GoJo Golic on Twitter, how would you describe the taste of the Baja Blast other than just the Baja Blast? You know it when you see it. You know it when you taste it.
Blast the numbness into your toes.
Yeah, that's probably it there. It's the
I was
diabetic
going
shock
to
kicking
say,
in. So.
I've never talked about a Baja Blast in my life, but I can only ever picture Jesse in labor when I hear the Baja Blast now. So thanks, guys. That's all I picture.
It is maybe the most... now you're right. Baja Blast is associated with Jessie, our dear colleague, Baja blasting her child out. Now we have Henry, which is great. The Baja baby, which is awesome. I'm excited to meet him and give that child his first sip of Baja Blast as an infant. Certainly nothing bad can happen with that. Speaking of potentially bad things happening, though, so at GoJo Golic on Twitter is where you can vote. Continue to help us move along here in the contest. You guys have been great with the turnout here. We are looking forward to crowning a champion, and we've appreciated all your help at every step along this way, filling out this bracket. But Claudia, very interesting theories surrounding stuff going on with the currently Oakland A's right now that I need you to walk us through here so we can decide if there's any validity to what might be going on here.
Yes, taking my tinfoil hat, although I don't really know if we need one, because this sounds like it makes a lot of sense to me. Two of the best players for the Athletics were basically demoted. So you have Esteri Ruiz, he was sent to the minors with a .429 batting average, and Brent Rooker, their only All-Star, was benched. They both led the team in hits last season. Basically, Rooker led in everything else. Ruiz was second behind Ronald Acuna Jr. in stolen bases. And then the organization says, oh, well, yeah, we wanted him to be a little bit more disciplined and wanted to get on base more, more hits. Oh, come on. He was batting almost .430. He was fine. So the conspiracy theorists and the fans, one particular group, got together called the Last Dive Bar. And they said, now that we think about it, these two players in particular were wearing our wristbands. And this group basically is against the ownership trying to tank and move to Las Vegas. So they think because the players wore these wristbands, the team is now going against them and going against their two best players trying to tank the season, which we know they want to get to Vegas. We know that's the point. But the conspiracy is that's why they benched them and that's why they sent them down to the minor. So I don't think I need a tinfoil hat because this sounds exactly like what it is, GoJo, but maybe am I just, I don't know, buying too much into it. I am a conspiracy theorist, so.
There's two ways to look at this. And by the way, Oakland, the A's have met with Oakland because they have about that 3-season period of where they're going to play before they go to Vegas. Will they stay in Oakland? They're going to meet with people in Sacramento as well. Is it going to be there that they play? There's two ways, Claudia, that you get dealt with this. It's that they're mad. The organization is mad because you are protesting or went against them type of a deal. Or there is the tanking. And whenever you say the word tanking, understand, never include the players because the players aren't involved in the tanking. How you tank somewhere is the lineup you put out on the floor, or on the court or on the ice. Whenever that changes and you're scratching your head as to why aren't our better players out there performing, the antennas start to go up on where you might want the season to go. Now, I don't know here. Again, they wore things protesting management, protesting the ownership, protesting the team that's writing them checks. So this very well could be hey, we're going to slap you down just to know, we know one of the big thing with athletes is you want your playing time, and playing time can lead to incentives and lead to more money, and we're going to slap that down, fall in line, don't be going against us, or you talk about the tanking side of it if you want.
Yeah, this does seem to be pretty cut and dry in that telling your boss you think they should be fired, probably not going to end well for you for the lion's share of guys. And that's just me thinking as a former guy that was a rank and file player. Like that would have never been something that I would have felt comfortable enough in my station on a team to go out there and try to do. Is it shady if the team's actually doing this? Absolutely. Is that a bunch of rabbit ear stuff that they shouldn't be concerned about? Probably not. But I also understand how these things work and the general tendency inside those buildings and how the ego's involved for everyone. Because we talk about egos of players and coaches, there's egos upstairs too in those different offices that got closed doors. And so I would look at that and going, all right, as a player who's always a back end of the roster guy, middle of the pack guy there, I would have always probably thought, well, yeah, if I do this, they're probably going to take a bite out of my ass, and I am not in a position to absorb that.
So you wonder how soon will Rooker be back in the lineup? When will Ruiz be called back up to the majors? We'll keep an eye, obviously, on that and see if this was just kind of a smackdown to say, listen, don't bite the hand that signs your check. That gives you all that money, so we're going to tap you down a little bit.
Well, I think the bigger picture here is the fact that the players know there's consequences, and that's how much they are feeling anger towards the ownership. So I think this leads to the bigger issue of Oakland's not a great place for players, apparently, right now, if they don't mind wearing bracelets that say, hey, ownership, we don't like you very much.
Yeah.
I was going to say, imagine how bad things have to be for you to forsake everything that we just talked about. Claudia is absolutely right. And so the vibes around there, all-time low.
Yeah, it is. And the one thing about that, I would say, if I ever tried something like that, I wouldn't get out the door. My wife would be like, where are you going with that wristband? You could possibly be suspended from the team. That means no paycheck? No. Take it off.
Nip it right off.
Take the wristband off. Find another way.
Like I said, we all got bosses.
Yeah.
They got bosses, and you got a boss, and we know which boss ends up winning out the majority of the time here. So something to keep an eye out. We're not even off and running in Major League Baseball season, and we're already talking about something like this. So coming up next, let's go with a literal palate cleanser in the world of Major League Baseball as the diamond continues to show out in one particular area that I am very intrigued by. All right, time to finish off the show the way we always do. This, that, the third. 3 quick stories to send you into the rest of your day. As always, download, subscribe, rate, review us. 5-star rating. DraftKings Network is where you can watch us Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern. You can also listen to the best of GoJo and Golic from noon to 1 p.m. Eastern, wherever you hear VSiN on the radio. But if you miss any of us live or any of our great guests, shout out to Zach Harper, who joined us earlier today. Again, you can read him over at The Athletic and listen to him covering the NBA on SiriusXM NBA Radio. You can check that out wherever you get our podcasts, as well as right here on YouTube as soon as we get done here. And guys, let's start off with this, that, and the third. We always know the college football, basketball, any sport transfer portal has become one of the hot topics du jour. But yesterday took an interesting turn here as we had an initial report that was then eventually walked back concerning LeBron James Jr. Hall of Fame reporter Dick Weiss originally tweeted out, USC freshman Bronny James is entering the transfer portal. Good for him. Needs to get away from the Hollywood hype. Best of luck to LeBron's kid, before ultimately deleting that post and walking it back, saying he can't confirm that story. LeBron was asked about it and ultimately said, Bronny, it's his decision. I haven't heard anything about that, but it's his decision. He's a grown man and can do that now. And so, Dad, I don't know what's going to happen here. I think everyone now just assumes kids jump into the portal, check their price tag, and then see how it goes forward there. But we know with Bronny, a decision like this is going to have a ripple effect for everyone because of his last name.
Well, it will. Plus, he was close to home, and LeBron could go watch. But as LeBron said, he's his own man. He's got to make his own decision. If that takes him somewhere else, So be it. And I'll recall Bronny James had the heart issue before the season started, and very, very scary, obviously. And his comeback, played in 25 games, averaged a little over 19 minutes a game, averaged a little under 5 points a game. I'm sure not the start that he wanted. Because all that talk of, is he a one and done? Are he and LeBron going to play to one another? That certainly has gotten put on, it seems, on the back burner a bit. So we'll see. All I know is if, in fact, because we've had the conflicting reports here, if he does end up in the portal, nobody's going to be shocked nowadays when anybody ends up in the portal.
Yeah, I guess that's the thing is, like, what would this really mean? Not much. It would mean that LeBron James Jr. was participating in the same culture around modern college athletics that almost everybody else is right now. I will say, he was the one I thought about first the other day when LeBron James made those comments about, hey, I don't have much time left. When LeBron James after the game was asked about his basketball future, Bronny was the first thing I thought about, because I think for a lot of people, we've associated the timeline for LeBron James' end of career with that goal and desire that he has stated over and over to play with his son somewhere along the way, and how that would line up contractually. And so I do wonder if that's something we've talked about. You mentioned before, my mom telling you not to do certain things, the role Savannah played, and maybe LeBron James calming down some of those public comments that have put a ton of pressure on their son, who already had a lot by being named LeBron James Jr. So something to keep an eye on. But again, these are unconfirmed reports. We don't know if this is actually going to happen. And even if it did, good for Bronny for doing literally what every other college player seems to be doing right now. Claudia, let's get to that. Dating rumors, always fun on this show, especially when they involve celebrities and the daughters of former professional athletes.
And Johnny Football, I feel like any headline you get with Manziel is always fun. This one, I think, is speculation more than anything, but I guess it makes sense because you can see his tattoos in a picture with Jose Canseco's daughter, who is a model, and she's pretty well known herself now. But she posted a picture of her on a plane, of her sneakers, but you can see Manziel's hands. They're very noticeable by the tattoos he has. And I don't know, I guess people like this kind of stuff. She's dated some other interesting guys, but I can't imagine dating Johnny Football's boring. I'm sure they have fun, guys.
No, I listen, and it's certainly been a big year for Johnny Manziel overall, right? We've seen in terms of the documentary that came out in the last couple of years about his time at Texas A&M, the interview that he did with Shannon Sharp talking about a lot of the modern culture around college athletics, the money that he was making back then and what he believed he could make now, the protest of the Heisman Trophy in name of Reggie Bush saying, I'm not going to attend the Heisman Trophy ceremony until the NCAA and the Heisman Trust give Reggie Bush back his Heisman. So big resurgent year for Johnny Manziel.
I just love when you get the possibilities of dating, of how it goes out. The two have not been spotted out in the town together just yet, but they have crossed paths and posed next to each other at Travis Scott's Cactus Jack Celebrity Softball game back in February. So maybe that's where the spark started to fly.
By the way, Travis Scott's got a celebrity softball tournament here?
Yeah, that's weird. Have you ever seen him run bases? And somebody said it's like that kid. It's like that kid at lunch who like sprints out. And it really is. You have to look it up if you guys haven't seen it. Like that guy, that first kid who sprints to, which they call him the anime kid, but GoJo, we know that anime is cool now, so I'm not going to call him that. But they say it's that one kid who's playing video games and like sprints to lunch. That's what Travis Scott looks like. And I do think I've seen a clip from that exactly. So anyways,
I mean, let's hope Travis Scott's not too scared right now. I don't know if you guys saw the other night, guys, but Drake sent a really clear message to Travis Scott in the midst of all their beef by firing off fake gunshots at a giant papier-mâché head of Travis Scott at his concert at Penn State. Give me a break. What is Drake doing? Grow up.
Yeah.
Dressed like a NASCAR driver firing fake shots off. Just
the heart in his
either
head.
Make a song or don't. Make a song or don't. It's really simple. People made a song about you, and now in this, the way that this is supposed to go, you're supposed to make a song about them. And I don't understand like a giant papier-mâché head? Are we in the third grade? What's going on?
Can I not comment on this one? I have no idea.
I can show you.
No idea what's going on.
Going back to it. So we have a famous, baseball player's daughter is dating Johnny Manziel. You don't have to talk on things you don't want to, Senior. Don't worry.
Hey, kudos to the production, right, of the mache head and the gunshots, and it made it look like the head blew up. Yes. And I mean, the NASCAR outfit not looking like thing, don't really understand, but, hey.
All I'm saying is the production value you put into that at the concert you could have just put into making the song that's a reply to the diss that Kendrick Lamar sent your way. But what do I know? I'm just a doctor. So with all that in the rear,
End of the day, hope these crazy two kids can make it, right?
Yeah.
You know, let's hope it's long and lasting.
Exactly. Yes. Great. Good for them if it does. Good for them if it doesn't. I hope everyone is healthy, wealthy, and wise. Claudia, let's get on to the third here and talk about the thing that I'm really excited about.
We can all get on board with this one. It's food in a baseball park. The Pirates have a pierogi dog, and I have to say, the second I saw this on Twitter, I thought of GoJo. It's an item called the Renegade, a foot-long hot dog topped with potato pierogies, pot roast, pickles, and onions. And if you can't picture it, you can go online and take a look at it. GoJo, you had a good idea when you saw this one, didn't you?
Listen, I love a good pierogi, by the way, very fired up about that. But yeah, listen, in general, the one thing Major League Baseball has always consistently done better than any of its peers is specialty ballpark food items. And I think part of it's because you got a little more time, you got a little more space and room around there, so you need more activities to do to keep yourself going there. But that's not to diminish the credit that everybody deserves. And I saw a lot of parks tweeting this out. The Dodgers rolling out a new lineup of food right near where I'm at in LA that I'm going to have to go check out pretty soon. And I know others have done this. Shout out to my great friend Susie, does an awesome job covering Major League Baseball and the Rockies. But she did the food tour to every Major League Baseball park to go and try all these out. Papa DraftKings, I think we need to talk about a little summer project here. Yep. That's all I'm saying here. I got time, you got gas money, and I have a stomach that's a bottomless pit for creative food dishes at ballparks here. Seems like a match made in heaven. I want to stuff some of this stuff in my face.
This is a great combination. And you know me and pot roast. Big fan of pot roast from years gone past. For those that are, followed me for a lot of years, you'll understand that one. But how I rate things too, Claudia, this for me to eat would be 2 beers as well. So that's a winner. To eat that foot long with all that's on there.
Wait, you would need to have 2 beers in you in order to feel comfortable eating that?
No, I would want to have 2 beers in me as I was eating that. I don't need anything. That's what I want.
I thought you were talking about the drunk scouts. I'd do that stone sober without even a whip.
Oh, no.
Claudia, what about you? You're less like us. Does this pierogi hot dog entice you at all?
100%. Guys, I love food, at ballparks especially. But yeah, I'd probably need like 2 or 3. Just because I'm supposed to be ladylike, I can't be eating a foot-long hot dog topped with pierogies in public. But I would if you give me 2 beers, so I'm with you.
Sure you can, Claudia. Break out of that shell, man. Do it. You're going to go with us, and you're going to eat that along with us.
But then you get it all. Again, yeah, okay, I will. Just get me a bib, and I'm good. Pirates bib.
Again, it's a well-worn path. Susie Hunter did a great job with it. Great friend from the Connecticut area covering the Rockies now. But I think that we can help with this. Everything's been done before. The Simpsons have done everything before. We just want to do it now. I am hungry. You guys have money. Let's figure it out and make this happen. You guys can help at GoJo Golic is where you can follow us on Twitter. Download, subscribe, rate, review. Thanks so much. Talk to you tomorrow.